a MAC address in this case, and I'm just filtering out any characters that other than alphanumeric just as a safety thing, assigning it to a channel variable, and then using that to dial SIP/whatever. So basically, calendar and Asterisk will trigger, call me. Once I've picked up the phone, then it'll call the other person for the meeting. I have some more complex examples in the next version of the book there. Not to keep pushing the book, but that's just where it happens to be, and I only have so much time. So just trying to use some clever dial plan there using the local channel, which is, this is for if I wanted to say set up a meeting between multiple participants. Asterisk will then trigger the call to a bunch of local channels, which then uses the originate function, or sorry, application, and then that calls all those participants and sticks them into a conference. And each of them are independent so that if one person doesn't answer, it's busy or whatever, it doesn't affect all the other people. And we're also not linear, so we're having to wait for the 30 seconds for that timeout and then call someone else, etc. Once all of that's done, then the organizers basically put it into the conference, and the conference starts. So prior to the administrator joining the conference, we can play music on hold, and people can't talk to each other and have it all professional. And then the organizer joins, is like, okay, we're ready to go. So Google Voice and Talk, ability to place calls between Google accounts with the web interface. The web interface is multi-platform and free, which is pretty much the only one I'm aware of that allows you to have a web interface which gives you a VoIP interface essentially on multiple operating systems. Most of the ones I've seen are just ActiveX, which is basically Windows only. And with Google Talk, it's going to give you the equivalent of like soft phone to soft phone communication. So not the PSTN or phone calls, but allows you to essentially call between users, just like Skype and some other networks. With Google Voice, though, you do get the ability to have essentially a free ITSP. So you can get like a free DID number within the USA to accept calls. This can now come into your Asterisk systems just like any other ITSP. It works essentially the same. You can place calls for free within the USA, and I'm pretty sure Canada. The downside is essentially it's only available to the residents of the United States. I'm not, but I still tested it because I basically have a VPN connection in the US and just signed up through that, which is probably outside the terms of service, but it's fun to test with. You do not need the VPN from what I found once you've got connected. So my Asterisk box is located in Toronto. It just works. So Asterisk 1.8 has Chan Gtalk and ResJabber updated to allow this functionality to happen. So it can accept and place calls using Google Talk and Voice, configured via the jabber.conf file, which is your user account, and the gtalk.conf file is used for the context control, so i.e. when the call comes in, which context to drop the call into. Requires a Gmail account versus using Google Apps. You can't use Google Apps because the functionality, and I have tried, and I tried a lot, and Malcolm and me were tested a lot, and I was like, hey, maybe it doesn't work with Google Apps, and that was pretty much the problem we were having there for a bit. So here's a sample jabber.conf file, fairly straightforward. We've disabled the debugging. Auto prune equals no is a good thing because if you're using it on, say, your primary Gmail account and you have a lot of contacts, if you have that auto prune enabled, you're going to lose all those contacts. Auto register, yes, just basically says, hey, yes, we want to register to our account here. We've defined an account called Asterisk, which we're set as a client. We set our server, our username, and our secret, which port. We're using TLS and SASL to connect, which is just encryption for the signaling part. And then we can even set our status, whether we're busy or not, and what a status message would be. So we just use gtalk.conf to control where the incoming calls are coming in. So essentially which context we're going to accept calls into. It's going to first try to match on the username, which is your email address, not who it was from, but your account name. And then if that's not available within the context, it's going to try and match on the S extension within the context you defined. And if that context doesn't exist or it's not found, it's going to try and match on S in the default context. Beyond that, it just fails the call. So simple configuration there. Our context is gtalk-incoming, and and we're using the connection called Asterisk, which is what we defined in the square braces. So here's some very simple dial plan. Comes in, we use the S extension, we answer, we wait a second, we send a call to my desk phone, and if I don't answer within 30 seconds, you get my voicemail, and we just hang up. Here's how you place calls to Google Talk users. So here I'm calling Malcolm through gTalk using my Asterisk interface, or the Asterisk that I set up in my jabber.conf, and that's who I'm calling. The email address is the destination. So here we have the bottom essentially just the formatting for that line. If we want to place calls via Google Voice, we just use gtalk/asterisk, which again is what we define in jabber.conf, +1. In this case, I've prefixed it with a 7. Sometimes it's just, you don't want to use that as your primary outgoing, so you set it up as a test and you prefix the number you're dialing. So all I've done is stripped with that extend :1, I've just stripped the 7 off of that and appended +1 to the beginning. And then I just at voice.google.com, which allows the call to go out through Google Voice. So distributed device state using XMPP permits the state of device, whether it's busy or not in use or the device is unavailable entirely, to be distributed across multiple Asterisk servers. This works with voicemail MWI as well. State of devices registered to Asterisk A are then known to the Asterisk B and vice versa, depending on how you have things configured. Versions prior to 1.8 have OpenAIS, and I think it was in 1.6.1 is when it first started or was implemented. It works quite well. I've used it. The downside is that it is limited to low latency networks, i.e. it has to be essentially within the same switch or within your LAN. You can't be putting it across the internet because it's very sensitive to timing and things like that. But by using XMPP, it allows us to essentially use this in different physical locations across the internet, and uses the Tegace XMPP server, which is available at tegace.org. Again, open source project, works quite well. So here's an example of essentially how you might have this set up. So at the top here I have my Tegace XMPP server, which has my XMPP stuff set up. And then I have my 2 Asterisk boxes where I have maybe SIP connected between them, and I've basically peered the 2 Asterisk boxes together as XMPP buddies and also connected them to the Tegace server. So I have my phones here over on the first server, and they're going to be known, like their device state is going to be known to the server over on the left there, which I just haven't shown any phones there, but if I had the 2 phones there and someone was on the phone, or maybe I'm using the server on the left here as a queue server, and this guy on the right is essentially my registration server, I can have the calls coming in from the ITSP, and the queue on the left there is going to know the device status of the phones over on the other server there. Here's a fairly more elaborate example where we have multiple sales and support and RMA queues, which are all separate physical boxes, and then we can peer them all together, and everything can essentially know the device state of phones across multiple servers. So it allows the queues to know what the device state of all our devices are, so we don't get multiple calls onto the same phone. What am I doing for time? Okay, perfect. So the instructions, wrote it wrote it on the doc directory in this text file, which I believe now is going to be on the new wiki that was announced this morning, and uses jabber.conf to configure the servers. So we'll just take a very quick look at the configuration here. Essentially, using jabber.conf, I've taken this Asterisk device section here. Again, just set up a client, set the host to be the other server. The pub sub node is the Tegace server. And then I have a username and a secret, and I'm telling it to distribute the events through this interface and have my connection set up. And then the buddy at the bottom is the other server. So you have to flip it around. So on the other server, we basically do all the same thing and essentially peer back to the other side. So server 2 has server 1 as a buddy, and server 1 has server 2 as a buddy. Pitch shift is just a neat little application which just changes the pitch of the audio on the channel. It can be on either sent audio or received audio, or it can be on on both at the same time. You can also change it dynamically using the features.conf file, so everything's independent there. It's really more of a toy, but I came up with a little example which I think is kind of fun. You could also use it to entertain yourself. If you had, say, a conference in the morning, I've set it up where Russell and Jim have had very high voices and sound like Mickey Mouse, and it's pretty entertaining for. Or if you have a particular person that calls and has a really high-pitched voice and you just can't handle it, you can always drop it down and make it a little more soothing to the ear. So based on the caller ID, set the pitch. It's like, oh, I'm going to drop that down a little bit, and it's just a lot better. Or maybe someone has a really deep voice and it breaks up on your phone and you just raise it up a bit. So the idea that we came up with is growing your company with pitch shift. I'm a single person. I'm a single consultant, but I want to sound like a big deal. So when, or maybe I want to screen my calls discreetly. And so the call comes in, and my administrative assistant answers the call and determines whether I'm available or not. And maybe they don't even need to talk to me. Maybe I transfer the call to sales, and Bob answers the phone. And Bob has a very deep voice, a lot more so than myself. So here's our example. I'm sorry, Mr. Madison isn't available at the moment. Can I transfer you to voicemail? So that's kind of the business use. It makes you sound like a much larger company than you really are. So I have a little demo before questions here, just so you can hear what it kind of sounds like as an example. Hopefully this will work. It worked in my room. Thank you for calling Life Madison Enterprises. Can I take your call? So here's the other one with the drop down. Oh, I didn't really test that. Hi, this is Bob in sales. How can I help you? And then we can get a little crazy. I have the audio kind of a little messy here. Hey, this is Mickey in IT support. How can I help you? So there we go. We're growing our company every day. So, questions? Yeah. It's just going to work as with the device state. So you just set up the hints and everything just